This is arguing with Joe Rogan guest, Peter Zeihan. So I already made actually a video of the same thing with my brother, but I realized that I didn't back it up with any data or any real numbers. So because Zeihan always uses numbers and data, although here in this instance when he was on Joe Rogan, he didn't really use as much. I will be using it though to show everybody that I think Zeihan is talking out of his ass. Why I'm saying it is because I think he does this gloom and bloom, and he, I think on purpose, misinterprets a lot of the data, a lot of the information for the clicks, for people to watch his videos, buy his books, read his articles. So anyways, let's get it rolling.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
The rich world was a population column from 1945 to 1992. And with the end of the Cold War, the developing world became a column in 1992 until now. The problem is that this is all temporary because birth rate keeps dropping, people keep living older, and your column eventually inverts into an open pyramid, upside down. And now you no longer have children, you no longer have a replacement generation at all. And there aren't enough people in their 20s and 30s to buy everything. And there aren't enough people in their 40s and 50s to pay for the retirees.
You no longer have a replacement generations at all? No more children? Come on. Children are born every day in China. So this is already a nonsense. What are we talking about? What we are really talking about is population decline. That's all it is. Okay, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It has happened in history all the time. So population growth wasn't always linear up, okay, because there were wars, there were famines. I'm sure in China too, of course. I know a bit more history in Europe if you go back, and in that one too, you know, Black Death and wars and everything. So population was always going like this. Although if we look at it, let's say 1,000 or year span, yeah, of course, it's gonna be going up, but it wasn't going up all the time, you know, straight. It would go like this. It just goes eventually up. So let's take a look at the labor force, because that's what he's arguing about, that there won't be enough labor force to take care of all the people, the old generation that cannot work anymore, right? And I guess the young generation too, who can't yet work. So I put together some numbers here. So the population of China in 2021 was over 1.4 billion people. All right, so they can, I'm pretty sure, use a little bit less because the actual area of China, the land area, is about the same as the USA, a little bit smaller, not much difference, but USA is less than 400 million. So, and China is 1.4 billion. It's huge, huge difference. Now, 0 to 9-year-olds, of course, they will not be in the labor force in this coming decade, because he is talking about the decade. So that's why I broke it down per decade, because apparently China is going to die from 2030 on. 10 to 14-year-olds. Some of them will be entering the labor force in the second half of the decade. So let's say we take half of those, let's say 3%, and then we have 11% here. So let's say 14 to 15% will not be entering the labor force within the next decade, or this decade for sure. Now, 15 to 44-year-olds, that is 39%. So this is the biggest group. And they will be in the labor force for the next 2 to 5 decades, okay? Now, 45 to 54-year-olds, that is 16% of this group, which is the second largest group, and it will be productive for another 10 to 20 years, all right? And then 55 to 59-year-olds is 8%, and some of them will be still working in this decade. And one of the reasons is that China will be changing the retirement age. Currently, retirement age for men is 60, And for blue collar worker woman is 50, for white collar woman is 55. But this will change in 2025 to be 55 for all women. China will raise retirement age to 65 for everyone by 2055. So that will actually change some of the numbers that I've been listing here for how long they're going to be able to work and be productive. All right. And then 60 and over, of course, who will definitely not be working is almost 19%. They are not in the workforce anymore. They will not be in the workforce anymore either. So it doesn't look as bad as he makes it out to be. And now China has stopped their one-child policy, so Chinese people can have more than one child going forward. But let's continue.
So this decade was always going to be the decade that most of the advanced world moves into mass retirement and the economic model collapses. And next decade was always going to be the decade that happened to the developing world. And we find out recently that the Chinese have jumped the ship, and this is their last decade too.
So let me show you guys something, because this is the whole premise of this video of his shtick, that China is gone, it's over this decade, so in the 2020 decade, but let's say early 2030s. Give him the benefit of the doubt. But I have found something very interesting. This is from January 22, 2010, where Mr. Zeihan, looking nice and young on this picture, said China collapse, global labor shortages, new American dominance. And he said the exact same thing in this article, that in this decade, from 2010 to 2020, China is going to die. Just like here, it's going to be gone. No more children, no more economy. They're going to starve to death, all that stuff.
So all of the globalized connections and consumptions that create the world we know, we are at the end of it. And we have to go back to a world where trade is more focused on the countries that have a better demographic and security infrastructure, because the Americans are no longer patrolling the global oceans anymore. So we're losing the security ramifications of an open system.
All right. So this is BS as well. And why? So global ocean patrol. So right now, so first of all, America didn't stop patrolling the oceans and the seas. I don't know why he's framing it that way. It might be reduced, or it's going to be reduced due to, economic and monetary constraints that America is now moving into more and more. But China has more ships. The Chinese Navy has more ships than the American Navy. So China right now has about 340 ships, and the United States has about 300 ships. Now China is aiming, here actually I'm going to bring this in, China is aiming to have 420 ships by 2025 and 460 by 2030, according to the Pentagon. All right. So between 2014 and 2018, China launched more Navy vessels than the combined navies of Germany, India, Spain, and the United Kingdom. Also, why I think what he's saying is nonsense, because it's not just the US, neither is just China that has navies. Germany, India, Spain, Italy, United Kingdom, some of the South American countries have navies as well. They are not as big as them, but if you combine them, they are quite a lot. Russia has a big navy. All of these navies are patrolling the oceans and the seas, not just the United States. So, come on.
At the same time, we're losing the demographic capacity to support it in the first place. And that's all going down right now.
So when you're saying that China has 10 years to go,
at most.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we now know that they've lied about their population statistics, and they overcounted their population by over 100 million people, all of whom would have been born since the one-child policy was adopted. So this is one of those places where they've got more people in their 60s and their 50s and their 40s and their 30s and their 20s.
Now, what was the logic behind the one child? Was it that they were overpopulating?
Mao was concerned that as the country was modernizing, the birth rate wasn't dropping fast enough, and that the young generation was literally going to eat the country alive.
That's true.
So they went through a breakneck urbanization program which destroyed the birth rate. At the same time, they penalized anyone who wanted to have kids. And both of those at the same time have generated the demographic collapse we're in now.
Yeah, that's
And the
partially
problem with that also was that they wanted male children.
Yeah, there's a cultural aspect to that too. And obviously
Yes.
men can't have kids on their own.
true. I love that.
And what is the ratio to men to women in the younger people in China now?
Before the data revision, with the last set of lies, it was about 1 to 1.2. It was the most distorted in the world, even more than Sri Lanka, where there had been a civil war for 30 years. Since then, we don't have good sex-by-sex data, but it's undoubtedly worse.
All right, let's go through this a bit, population and the gender problems. So the 100 million people that he's talking about, that works out to about 7% of the population. It's not a small number, not a huge number, whatever. But he was talking about the 1 to 1.2 female to male ratio. That would mean that 20% more males than females. That is, I don't think that's true at all. I haven't found any numbers even close to that, not even in India. The sex ratio in China from 1953 to 2022, a link that I will link down into the description where you guys can read it for yourself. But between 2000 and 2022, the average was around 105 males to 100 females in China. But this number is getting closer and closer every year. Now, comparing it to India, from between 2005 and 2015, there were 90 females to 100 males. So let's say even if China was that bad, that's only 10%, not even close to the 20% he's saying. In 2019 to 2021, there was 108 boys to 100 girls, which is an amazing thing in India. That's it's a rapid equalization, and it's due to the government intervention and cultural shift. So yes, culturally, this is a big problem in Southeast Asian countries, India, Sri Lanka, like I said, and China too, where males are prized higher than females. In fact, so much so that sometimes females are barely even human in some contexts compared to males. So everybody wants a male offspring. So that's why, like in China too, and in India, either they would have abortions if it wasn't going to be a boy, or even when it was born and they didn't have the technology, or they didn't have the opportunity to do an abortion, they would kill the baby that was born female. I don't know how much they did in China, but 100% in India, like they definitely did it. They are probably still doing it in mostly in rural areas. In big cities in India, it's not done anymore. The urban people don't care if it's male or female as much. Also, after World War II, once the communists took over, and after the communists took over, the famine killed somewhere around 30 million people by 1962 in China. So that's one of the reasons why the one child came in, and because they didn't want this problem again, where people just die of hunger. And although the Chinese countryside were exempted, one of the reasons why is because you need more help to tend to the fields. So it's good to have children that are going to be raised to be farmers, because especially back then it wasn't as mechanized as it is now.
And so what are the other problems that they're encountering that leads you to believe that they only have 10 years left?
Well, without young people, we've seen their labor costs increase by a factor of 14 since the year 2000. So Mexican labor is now 1/3 the cost of Chinese labor. Their educational system focuses on memorization over skills. So despite $1 trillion of investment in a bottomless supply of intellectual property theft, they really haven't advanced technologically in the last 15 years. Mexican labor is probably about twice as skilled as Chinese labor now, even though it's 1/3 the cost.
All right. Let's go into this. First of all, China has probably surpassed some of the Western world in many technologies. If you look at their cities, their country technologically, I think it is more advanced than most of the Western cities and some of the Western countries. That's a completely false assertion. Also, Chinese doing their own research, both in the military and in the private sector, and they are having gains in many areas. Labor cost, yes, he's right, mostly. So one that shows that production workers' salaries in China is indeed closer to triple, but production managers and supervisors' salaries are about half of that too, Mexicans. Another source said, according to a US company that helps businesses to manufacture in Mexico, as of 2019, the fully burdened direct labor wage in Mexico was about $3.95 per hour. China was $4.50. In 2021, the average Chinese worker earned $16,153. Mexicans earned $16,610, and the Americans $58,120 per year. China has a lot of production. It has B2B markets, it has consumer brands, it has sourcing and access to all raw materials needed. They get the raw materials, of course, from, let's say, Russia, from Africa, from South America, and of course, a lot from the United States. But they don't need necessarily the United States for all this stuff because they are getting it from all over the world. And China itself has a huge consumer base, 1.4 billion people. So they are their own best consumers in a way. And China is the only country that possesses all industrial categories according to the United Nations Industrial Classification. So China has the largest labor market, has a strong high-tech capabilities such as digitization, automation, and data analytics. Everything is connected in China. We saw it during COVID lockdowns, how well everything is connected in China, and they can just almost like press a button and everything happens the way they want it. They have a sophisticated logistics and transport infrastructure within China, including the world's largest network of high-speed rail and expressway in terms of mileage, which allows products to be transported more efficiently. Now, the US rail system is falling apart. I mean, we have clearly seen it this year with all the trains coming off the tracks and crashing and wreaking havoc in the United States. And it's happening all the time.
They've consolidated into an ethnic-based, paranoid, nationalistic cult of personality. And it's very difficult for the Xi administration to even run it because it's not an administration.
Yeah, it's true that their culture is like that. Pretty much the head of China is the emperor. Whether it's communism or not, he's pretty much the emperor.
Anymore. No one wants to bring Xi information on anything. So like Putin lied.
Yeah, I'm sure the leader doesn't want any information about how to lead his country, how to make it better, how to make it competitive, how to position it against all the other major powers. Because China wants to become a major power. It wants to be a bigger, better power, especially economically, than the United States and Europe. So he's probably getting information all the time. Otherwise, how would he be able to make the decisions and tell the specialists what to do? I mean, it's not the leader's job to make to necessarily take all the data and work it out from the data what's going on. No, they are specialists for it that will bring him the conclusions, and then he makes the final decision which way to go. When they probably bring, we could do this, we could do that, options, and he's the one as a leader to say, well, this is the way we are trying to go, so this is what we will do in the future. This is what I want implemented.
his face, for example, but last February about the war, saying, why would I invade Ukraine? And you can see in some of the presses, the defense guys in the back of the room, like, I didn't want to say anything because she has a history of shooting people he doesn't like.
That's probably true. That they take care of people he doesn't like, but Russia didn't tell anybody that they're gonna attack. Well, why would they? Even Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, didn't know until like a day before or the same day when they attacked. Why would they tell China? What the hell?
And so the Chinese were the only country that was caught with their pants down when this all went down. The Biden administration is basically taking the trade policy of Donald Trump and running it through a grammar checker and putting it into institutions. So we now have tech barricades that prevent the Chinese from buying the equipment, the tools, or the software that's necessary to make semiconductors. In fact, he went so far as to say any Americans working in the sector have to either quit or give up their American citizenship. Every single one of them either quit or was transferred abroad within 24 hours. So the tech system is stalled. They don't have the young people to go consumption-led.
Tech system is stalled? What are you talking about? China is number one maker of electric vehicles. The Chinese companies have overtaken Tesla now. In China, it's so competitive that Tesla had to drop their price twice. So you can buy a Tesla way cheaper. I think it's like 30% cheaper than in the States. I don't know what is he talking about.
They're completely dependent on the U.S. Navy to access international trade. They are the most vulnerable country in the world, right?
They are a bit vulnerable, that's for sure. They have some vulnerabilities, but they have more ships than the U.S. Why do they need the U.S. to patrol the oceans for them? Come on.
Now, and based on how things go with Russia, we're looking at a significant amount of raw materials falling off the map, specifically food and energy. And the Chinese are the world's largest importer of both of those things.
That's true. Both of those things, they're importing a lot of those things. But Russia has been getting closer even before the war to China. And now because of the war, they are extremely close.
So there's no version of this where China comes through looking good. And the challenge for the rest of us is to figure out how do we, in as smooth and quick as a process as possible, figure out how we can get along without them.
There is truth to that. Like, you gotta figure out because all the manufacturing is in China. So if China goes down, it's gonna bring everybody with them. So that's why I don't think it's just gonna go down like that, because the United States can't afford it. Because if China goes down, America goes down. It's that simple. Just like we saw, even medicine. So most medicines that the United States uses is manufactured in China. Or at least a lot of the medicines that are manufactured in the United States are getting the raw materials for it, the ingredients from China. So it's like United States would have major problems if China all of a sudden just closes borders or they went into a complete chaos. That would be a chaos in the whole world.
Because they are going away. And they're going away this decade for certain.
Where?
Well, if you say they're going away,
There's 1.4 billion people with one of the biggest navies and armies, and the economy is going to go away too within years. Like if you said, in 50 years or 100 years, who knows?
clearly they're not just going to lay down. They're
they'll
going to
die.
try to adjust.
Yeah, they'll die.
Right? But how so? Do you think this is because, like, what is, other than, well, here would be a big problem, right? Mm-hmm. Taiwan.
So, just to show you guys, China GDP in 2010 was $6 trillion US dollars. USA 2010 $15 trillion US dollars. 2021 China 17.7, almost $18 trillion. USA $23 trillion. So China has grown almost, pretty much like triple their GDP, they tripled their GDP in 11 years, while United States only added about half as much to their GDP. So China is closing the GDP gap with the United States. Gold reserves. China has 2011 tons, USA has 8,000 tons. So USA has, well, at least that's what USA says, because I'm not sure if I believe that they have 8,000 tons, because nobody seen it, nobody were able to count it. And I'm not sure if this number, that 8,000, over 8,000 tons in the United States, does it include all those gold reserves that other countries gave to the United States to keep safe? Like Germany, like England, like a lot of countries actually keep a lot of their gold reserves, not all of it, in the United States for safekeeping. It would be interesting to find out. Foreign exchange reserves of the G20 countries, China is number 1 with $3 trillion US. USA is number 21 with $37 billion US. So China has 84 times more reserves than the United States.
Like if we impose the kind of sanctions that we've imposed on Russia, if China decides to invade Taiwan and the world stands up and the world imposes sanctions on China, how does that go?
Very ugly for the Chinese. So, say what you will about the Russian economy. It's corrupt, it's inefficient, it's not very high value add, but it's a massive producer and exporter of food and energy. You put the sanctions that are on the Russians on Beijing, and you get a deindustrialization collapse and a famine that kills 500 million people in under a year. And the Chinese know this.
We need Russian.
They can only push so hard.
Manufacturing.
Also, you can make the argument that if the Russians succeed, they actually solve or at least address some of their problems. Even if the Chinese were able to capture Taiwan without firing a shot, it doesn't solve anything for them. They're still food importers. They're still dependent on the United States. They're still energy importers. And even if they take every single one of those semiconductor fab facilities intact, they don't know how to operate them because they can't operate their own.
But Taiwanese
and their
can't
own
operate
are
them?
among the worst in the world, not the best.
Whew.
That's for sure. That's a lot of bullshit right there. So if China takes over Taiwan and get their manufacturing factories, they can't operate. They don't need to. Chinese don't need to operate them because the Taiwanese will operate them for them. Come on. If China takes over Taiwan, they take over the people too. They're not gonna eradicate the Taiwanese people, because also Taiwanese people are Chinese people, the same people. It's just what happened is how Taiwan became is when China had the communist revolution, then a group of Chinese people who didn't want to be communists, they went onto the island and they created their own country, pretty much. And they said they don't want to be part of the Chinese communist system. Thank you very much. We will make our own system. So that's what happened. And China wasn't, at the time, wasn't strong enough to actually go to the island and take it over. They just didn't have the capability. They didn't have the force. So yes, the chips, computer chips manufacturing, Taiwan takes 63% of global production share. So that's why Taiwan is so important for the US, for China, for everybody, pretty much. South Korea is 17%, huge. USA 7, China 7. So they have the same amount of global share. Just quickly about the food imports, before I get into China mining. The EU is the largest food exporter into China. So China imports most food from the EU, then from the Taiwan, then US. Okay, so US is on third. Then Japan, South Korea, Austria, Malaysia, Russia and Brazil combined to a bit more than the United States, BRICS. Also, Vietnam and Indonesia combined to be the same amount as the United States for food exports to China. So I think Mr. Zeihan keeps forgetting that the world, other than China and USA, includes a lot of other countries that also produce food. So come on, man. They're not gonna go hungry that easily just because the United States decides not to ship them food. Even if Russia said no, it's gonna be a big problem, but they might be able to solve it. China mining, very, very interesting. That's why I wanna go into this. So in Afghanistan, the Taliban are sitting on 1 trillion worth of minerals, such as iron, copper, gold, also rare earth minerals, and perhaps most importantly, potentially one of the world's biggest lithium deposits. And we know how important that is for the apparent future. So on January 6th, the Taliban signed a contract to extract oil from the Amu Darya Basin with a subsidiary of the state-owned China National Petroleum Company. So there's even oil there. In 2008, a Chinese company took a 30-year lease for a mine to extract 11 million tons of copper, but they haven't started yet due to the war. But now, since America left, which is interesting that Biden was so eager and so quick to leave Afghanistan, because now they can start mining. China can start mining there as long as they can make a deal with the Taliban, which they already been making. Now, China controls 65% of the world's lithium processing and refining capacity in 2021 through owning mines all over the world. Chinese companies are buying up lithium mines in Africa, such as in Mali, Zimbabwe's Bikita Minerals, the only mine in Africa producing lithium as of 2021. And then also in Mexico and Ireland, they are buying up. Ganfeng Lithium, which supplies Tesla, disclosed that it has agreed to acquire Argentina-focused mining group Litea. Argentina is part of the lithium triangle and has the world's second largest lithium reserves beneath its salt flats, behind Chile and ahead of Bolivia. So again, China can get all these things unless America all of a sudden just attacks all of these countries and takes all these mines for themselves. But I don't think it's impossible for them to go all over the world and take everything from the Chinese. Now, Russia. The natural resources potential of Russia is over 20% of the world's reserves. All right, so Russia is now ranked in the global top 5 countries in terms of gold and foreign exchange reserves. So Russia, it's probably higher now since the war. Now, Russia is the world's second largest arm exporter with 18.6% of global trade. USA takes 38.6%. China is only 4.6%, which equals Germany, because China is more of a importer than exporter of arms. Russia sells them a lot of arms. All right, so these are all the numbers that I have gathered, which I think puts a dent into some of what he has been saying, but I think the rest of this video doesn't really matter as much. I hope I explained and I showed all the information that's in there. I hope this helps. Just comment and tell me if I'm completely wrong, but I will put all the information down below into the description. Hopefully some pushback for this guy, because he's talking a lot of nonsense, unfortunately. When he could talk a lot of sense, because he has all the information and he has been doing this for many, many, many years. So he could be actually doing this right, but he's not.